Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So, on the topic of the hijab, we looked at the mothers of the believers, radiallahu anhum. Now we are on to the average Muslim woman. What is the hijab of the average Muslim? So, as we discussed before, when we said hijab, said that's not a Quranic concept. When in respect to the mothers of the believers, we said it was a complete segregation, completely behind a barrier. So, what does it mean vis-a-vis in respect to the average Muslim women? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, tell the believing women to lower their gaze, i.e. from the opposite sex, and guard their chastity, and not to reveal their adornments except what normally appears. So this is the verse of the hijab. Not to reveal their adornments, their zina, illa ma dhahara minha, apart from that which normally appears. So then the Quran makes a distinction between three people. Non-mahram men, meaning a man you're not related to. Mahram men, meaning a close male relative, your brother, your son, your father, your uncle, your nephew, etc. And then your husband. Right? So these are these three things. So hijab in front is meaning don't reveal your hidden adornments, your hidden beauty, to anybody who is not a male relative or your husband. So what does this mean? The Sahaba, they debated this, right? They debated this. The Sahaba, the students of the Prophet ﷺ, they debated this verse. One position that many adopted was that it means other than the face and hands, meaning you can expose the face and hands, you can't expose anything other than that. Right? So face and hands is considered outward, is illa ma dhahara minha, is except that which is normally visible, meaning face and hands. Right? And the other opinion is illa ma dhahara minha, meaning cover yourself completely and just do the best. Obviously you can't not exist. So, covering yourself completely, essentially you're all covered, but you can still see you're there. And these are the two opinions from among the Sahaba. So these are not extremist opinions. We have to respect both opinions, right? They both exist among the Sahaba and the Tabi'een, the early Muslims. I.e., that's the idea of hijab. So the word hijab, that is a modern term, right? That is borrowed from certain words in the Quran, but doesn't mean that. It means a woman has to cover everything apart from face and hands. So it does not say that she has to wear a hijab. It says she has to cover everything other than her face and hands in front of non-mahram men. The other opinion is the opinion of wearing niqab or a burqa, which is covering everything, right? Covering everything. And so Al-Qadi Iyad, the great Andalusian hadith scholar, he says in his commentary on Sahih Muslim, he says all of the foregoing, various hadith, etc., is a proof in the eyes of the scholars that a woman is not obliged to cover her face. Right? So he espoused the position, the majority opinion, which is wearing a niqab, wearing a burqa is not obligatory. She does not have to cover her face. Rather, it is merely a recommendation. So notice he's not labeling niqab as something extreme or weird or strange, obviously because we've just seen that the wives of the Prophet ﷺ were totally covered behind a curtain, right? So it's not something strange and weird to him. He's just saying it's not obligatory, that's all. And it is a recommendation for her. And rather, it is the onus is on men to lower their gaze from her, right? So this is the concept of the hijab, meaning you have to cover everything other than face and hands, right? This is the majority opinion of the early scholars. They saw it as niqab as something that's still recommended, and that it is man's obligation to just lower the face, and simple as that. So this is the concept of hijab. So this is supported by hadith such as this hadith in Abu Dawood. When a woman reaches puberty, it is not appropriate for her to show anything except this and this. And the Prophet ﷺ pointed to his face and hands, right? So that means that you could, a woman can expose her face and expose her hands. And in Sahih Bukhari, the Prophet ﷺ said, a woman in pilgrim sanctity does not wear a niqab or gloves. So you're going on Hajj, you're in ihram, your pilgrim sanctity, for Hajj or Umrah, you're not allowed to wear niqab. You're not allowed to wear gloves. So presumably your hands would be exposed and your face would be exposed, right? That's the assumption there. So had it been obligatory, right, as many argue, why would it be forbidden to do that, right? You're now going to be a situation you're most likely going to see men because there's going to be a lot of people there. And so had it been obligatory, why would you have been forbidden to wear niqab or wear gloves? Similarly, in the Sunan Abi Dawood, a woman came to the Prophet ﷺ wearing a niqab, asking about her son who had died as a martyr, who had been martyred. And so one of the Sahaba said, "You come asking about your son and you wear a niqab?" Exclamation mark. Oh my God, that was such a strange thing. Like, why are you doing this? Right? And so we can tell by the fact that they're surprised, right, that it's something that wasn't necessarily the case, right? What does she respond? Again, she's a strong woman. We spoke about strong women before. She said, "I may have lost my son, but I have certainly not lost my modesty," right? So, was the niqab there? Yes. Was everybody wearing niqab? No. Did everybody see it as obligatory? No. Did some people see it as obligatory? Yes. Right. So this is the concept of the hijab. So that's the hijab. Now, hijab, again, does not mean, as we're talking about, a piece of cloth covering your head and neck. That's not what it means, right? And the most important thing about the hijab is it has to be loose. So the verse does not mention hijab. What does it talk about? It says, "O wives, ask your prophets, daughters, and believing women to draw their cloaks." So a woman is wearing a cloak. That is the idea, over their bodies. Okay? So the idea of wearing a cloak, right? Another verse mentions, "And let them draw their veils," right? وَلْيَضْرِبْنَ بِخُمُرِهِنَّ خِمَارٍ. So the word hijab does not exist. This is the point I was trying to stress before. Hijab means total segregation. That's what it means in the Quran. So the Quran talks about two things. Talks about the khimar and talks about the jilbab. The khimar and the jilbab. Right? Khimar from the word khamr, which is wine. So khamara yukhamiru mukhamaratan khimaran means to cover over something. Like the wine covers over your mind. Right? So the idea is you have a cloak. Right? Like a hooded cloak, something you put around you. Right? So you're covered up and it's loose. Okay, that's what the Quran is talking about. So when somebody says, "I wear hijab," that's interesting. What do you mean by "I wear hijab"? Do you mean a curtain? Because that's what the Quran talks about. Or do you mean "I wear a khimar"? Or do you mean you wear a jilbab? Right? So this is something that is a cloak. There's something that is very loose and wide. It covers from your head all the way down to your body, over your body. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, there are two are the types of denizens of hell who I did not see. I haven't seen them. People who are in hell I've never seen. And then he mentions the first category. The second category is what? And women who would be dressed but yet appear naked. Right? Kasiyat ariyat. Who are tempted and are a temptation. Right? And so this is this key thing. And so it's really important to understand that our scholars of the past, for us today, it's easy. You read the hadith, that, yeah, right? You read this hadith to a non-Muslim, that, yeah, we know what it means to be dressed and undressed. That's easy. But they didn't understand what it meant. Scholars of the past were really stuck. They had no idea what it meant. What does it mean to be dressed and undressed? This is confusing. Right? They didn't understand. There were different explanations here. Maybe it's tight, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, etc. Now it's very simple. It's very easy to understand exactly what that means. That's because this is modern society. This is post-1950s. The world post-1950s is like, yeah. Women, the way women dress in the street, yeah, it's like you're dressed but not dressed, yeah. It makes a lot of sense, right? They will not enter paradise and they would not smell its scent even if its scent can be smelt from miles and miles away. They won't even catch the scent of it. Right? So, hijab You're wearing hijab, sister. May Allah reward you, increase you in whatever steps you've taken and wherever you are in your iman. We're not here to judge. But we have to understand that what is hijab? Hijab is, you meaning you're wearing a khimar. That's what you mean. You mean you're wearing a jilbab. Meaning you're something that's covered your head, it's covered your neck, and it's loose. Okay, it's loose. That is the Quranic concept of it, right? A cloak. Now, the question is, what age do you wear the hijab, right? What age? So, the Prophet ﷺ said, when a woman reaches puberty, it is not appropriate for her to show anything except this and this. So the default is that the hijab is obligatory when she reaches puberty, right? So that doesn't mean when she's married, right? Or when she's a late teen, right? It means when she reaches puberty. That's the default. Now, the Prophet ﷺ, so it's also narrated that Aisha radiallahu anha said that, so these are the words of Aisha, not the Prophet ﷺ, that she said, when a girl reaches 9 years old, she is considered a woman, right? And so, because why? Often girls reach puberty 9, 10, 11, 12, etc. And so, so basically at that beginning possible time, that's why we treat them as a woman. So this is really, really important. Why? Right? So in this class, we're talking about huge paradigm shifts. Huge paradigm shifts. So one of these huge paradigm shifts is the idea that a girl is just a girl. She's just a girl, for crying out loud. She's only 13. Why would she wear hijab? That's just a weird thing. Right? She's only 16. She's not even married. Why would she wear hijab? That's just a weird thing. The answer is, in Allah's eyes, when you reach puberty, you're morally responsible. Right? And so we need to prepare people for that. So the Prophet ﷺ, he told us to prepare children for adulthood at the age of 7. Right? At the age of 7, you tell them to pray. At the age of 7, you tell them you can't lie. They need to know the basics of the deen at the age of 7. Not that they don't know anything. Right? And suddenly, at the age of, when they reach puberty, now they're responsible for all of these huge, phenomenal things. Right? And so, anyway, there's a bit of debate there, but we should be careful. And the key thing to understand is we need to prepare people early, right? So the earlier you can do it, the better, because it makes life easier. Adjusting is hard, particularly for pubescent girls. So is it the hijab or is it the niqab? It's a debate. We respect both opinions. We have to respect both opinions. That's part of the pluralistic concept of traditional Islam. But to be fair, it's important to just be frank. The niqab is the majority opinion of late scholars, right? And one of the pieces of evidence that some late scholars is they quote Imam al-Haramain. So Imam al-Haramain is the teacher of Imam Ghazali, right? So this is about 1,000 years ago. He said, our Iraqi scholars, meaning he's talking about in the Shafi school. He's a Shafi. So in the Shafi school, we had the Iraqis and the Khurasanis. He said, our Iraqi scholars have held that a woman's exposing her face is sinful. She can't do that. Unless there is a need. For example, she has to passport or something like that, right? This is a stronger opinion in my view, seeing as all Muslims prevent their women folk from dressing up outside and showing their faces outdoors. So he said, given that no Muslim family ever lets the women folk go outside with their face uncovered, right? Then it's a stronger opinion. It's not just a cultural norm, but it is actually correct, right? So what he's saying is all Muslims do that, right? So this is alleged by many, right, to be a consensus, meaning this is what all Muslim people do, right? And so there's an issue here: is this really true or not? But the point is, you will see this quote all over the internet, right? When you look up niqab, people will be quoting Imam al-Haramain saying, yeah, there's consensus. Like, this is what everybody did, right? Everybody did it. And in reality, there's a kind of internal debate in each madhab about, is it really the case or not? But the key thing is social degradation. This is a key thing we have to understand. Social degradation. So, Al-Jariri, one of the great early Muslims, he said, the first generation of Muslims made the basis of their dealings between one another genuine submission to religion, deen. They had solid deen, right? You could just see it permeating every single aspect of their life. But then, religious fervor dwindled. رق الدين. The second generation dealt with one another on the basis of loyalty. If we can't have religion, at least we can be loyal to one another. Until loyalty too disappeared. The third generation made self-respect and reputation their standard. Okay, forget deen, forget being loyal. At least just like keep up appearances, right? Like that would be shameful, right? To do that, right? That would be like you'd lose your name, right? You'd lose your self-respect if you behaved in that kind of way. Don't do that. Don't sell a car like that. Don't talk to people like. Don't dress like that, right? Reputation. But then people stopped having any self-respect. They didn't even care anymore. The fourth generation dealt with each other on the basis of merely trying not to embarrass themselves. Haya, right? Let's just not embarrass ourselves, guys, right? This is getting really bad. Until people no longer had any sense of shame. After that, the only thing that motivates people is fear and worldly gains. Meaning, if I pay you, you'll do something. If I fire you, you do something. If I put you in jail, you do something. So this is a key thing to understand, right? A key thing to understand is that the Muslims, there's been social degradation. The Prophet ﷺ told us about it, and it's happening, and it has happened, it continues to happen. And so what happens then is gender interaction, because people have less akhlaq, less character, things have to change a little bit, right? Like when I can trust you, you can trust me, we'd have to write everything down. But suddenly if I can't trust you and you can't trust me, we're going to write every single thing down in our business, right? And have receipts, and take pictures of receipts, and save the pictures of receipts in 2 different drives, etc., etc., etc. You get lots of things when there's lack of trust. So social degradation is we see it on many things, particularly when it comes to how the fuqaha talk about gender interaction. So here we find, for example, al-Haskafi in the Hanafi school, and the default in the Hanafi school is niqab is not obligatory, right? So he says a young lady, meaning not a super old lady. We'll discuss that in a second, right? There's a young lady, meaning are you super unbelievably old, like 90 years old? If not, you're a young lady. It's prohibited from exposing her face in front of men, not because it is itself part of her nakedness, but rather for fear of temptation. So notice that. So this is Haskafi is, I believe, 7th century, 8th century, something like that. And he's saying, there's a fear of temptation. So yes, she is obliged to wear niqab. Right? In Sharh by Sharh Saghir by Ad-Dardir, so this is late Maliki, right? He is Dardir, I think more than 200 years ago, more than that. So Ahmed Dardir, so he's one of the Shuyukh al-Azhar back in the day, major reference for the Malikis, modern Malikis and late Malikis in general. He said that awra, the nakedness that needs to be covered of a free woman in front of a non-mahram man, is her entire body with the exception of face and hands, right? We already know that. As for the face and hands, even if they're not part of the nakedness that needs to be covered, they still must be covered for fear of temptation. So notice the Maliki school, which says, no, it's not actually obligatory to wear, you don't have to wear niqab, right? Even them, they're saying, because for fear of temptation, right? So this is genuinely what you see. If you just look across the late schools, anything written over the last 500 years, that's what you're going to see. Everyone's going to say niqab. Basically, everyone's going to say niqab, right? Fast forward to the 21st century, then you're going to have the questions that we had, right? Case in point, Huda Sha'arawi, right? Famous Egyptian activist who took off her niqab in public. Shock horror, right? The fact that it was a shock horror for a woman to take off a niqab in public means that everybody was wearing niqab in Egypt, right? That was what you did, right? So yes, the maybe the default position is it's not obligatory, but because of social degradation, majority of late scholars say yes, it's obligatory to wear niqab, right? The question then is, when you say niqab, many women wear niqab and expose their eyes. Is that even niqab, right? Because what they're talking about is covering everything, like every single, like gloves and everything. That's what they're talking about, right? So if someone's going to follow the position of wearing niqab, it would mean cover your eyes and your hands, right? So we have spoken about the wives of the Prophet ﷺ. We've spoken about Muslim women in general. Inshallah, next we're going to go on to elderly women, and this is very important because each can be understood in its context. You can't understand hijab without understanding the hijab vis-a-vis the wives of the Prophet. You can't understand the hijab of a normal Muslim woman without comparing it to the hijab of an elderly woman. So it's very important.